Welcome back to another philosophy video. In this video, I am going to explain to you a few rules concerning categorical syllogisms. In order to properly understand categorical syllogisms, unless you already know this, I recommend going back to my channel and finding the lecture that explains categorical logic and the traditional and the modern square of opposition. But for those of you who already know the basics of categorical logic, you know that there are four categories. They're here represented on the traditional square of opposition. These four categories are known as A, E, I, and O. There are two categorical forms. There are universals, A and E, and there are the corresponding particulars, I and O, or as they call them, the subalterns. So, in this video, I will explain to you the basics of categorical syllogisms. In the next video, I will teach you how to use the three Venn diagram technique for testing them. A standard form categorical syllogism is a deductive argument that has three statements, two premises, and a conclusion. I call it standard form because a syllogism, the word syllogism, refers to an argument that has two statements and a conclusion, but not necessarily in standard form. Standard form means that a syllogism has exactly three distinct terms, and each term occurs exactly twice. Let me give you this example. In this example, you see that two premises and the conclusion: no bananas are animals. Premise 2, some mammals are animals. Therefore, the conclusion: some mammals are not bananas. You notice that bananas occurs twice, animals occurs twice, and mammals as well, twice. Okay? So there are three terms: animals, mammals, and bananas, and they occur twice. No more than that, no fewer times than twice. Now, here are the following are the rules that a categorical syllogism must obey in order for a syllogism to be known as a standard form, to be in standard form. The first rule is that its premises and its conclusion must be in categorical form, which means that all the premises and the conclusion must be stated as categorical statements of the form A, E, I, or O. The second rule is that there must be exactly three different terms, as I just demonstrated a few seconds ago. The third rule is that each term, as I also explained, occurs twice. The fourth rule is that the major premise must always be the first premise, and the minor premise is always the second, and the conclusion is always last. Now, you might wonder, but isn't this obvious? No, it's not obvious, because when you argue, when you write an argument, or you explain an argument verbally, you're not required to state the conclusion last and the first premise first. You can do whatever you want. But if you are presenting a standard form categorical syllogism, then these are the rules. First premise is the major, second premise is the minor, and the conclusion is last. Now, why do I call the first premise the major? Not so much because it's the first premise. Why do I call the second premise the minor? Not because it's the second. I'm going to explain to you in a minute why. But first, let me say the fifth rule. The fifth rule for a standard form categorical syllogism is that the middle term never occurs in the conclusion. Now, I'm speaking of major, minor, and middle. What are these? These are the three terms of a categorical syllogism. Always remember, I'm talking about a standard form categorical syllogism. Now, in order to identify which is the major, which is the minor, and which is the middle, you have to take a syllogism in standard form and look at the conclusion. This example, no trees are humans, some babies are humans, therefore some babies are not trees. Focus on the conclusion. Some babies are not trees. You notice that the conclusion is a categorical statement. What kind of categorical statement, by the way? Some babies are not trees. This is an O-form statement, right? Because it says some S are not P. Now, in this statement, the word babies is the subject, and the word trees is what we call the predicate. Okay, then, the major term of a syllogism is always the predicate of the conclusion. The minor term is always the subject of the conclusion. And the middle term is, well, the third one, the one that does not occur in a conclusion. In this case, it's going to be humans. So this is why we call the first premise the major premise, the second premise the minor premise, and the major and the minor premises, as you just saw, contain the middle term. And the middle term is that term that never occurs in the conclusion. So now, in order to precisely understand a standard form categorical syllogism, we have to understand the mood, which refers to the way that the syllogism is, not the way, it refers to the type of categorical statements that are stated in the premises and in the conclusion. So the mood is represented by three letters, the letters representing the corresponding categorical forms. To give you an example, in this categorical syllogism, no trees are humans, some babies are humans, therefore some babies are not trees. The first premise is stated in the E form, the second one in the I form, and the conclusion, it's an O form statement. Consequently, the mood for this particular syllogism is EIO. In order now to understand precisely a categorical syllogism, we must understand something else called the figure. The figure refers to the position of the middle term. So, for example, compare these two categorical syllogisms, A and B. Notice that they have the same mood. all scientists are college graduates. This is an A statement. Then the second statement is some athletes are college graduates. This is an I. And the conclusion, some athletes are scientists. This is also an I. What about B? All artists are egoists. We have A. Some artists are Americans. We have I. Conclusion, some Americans are egoists. And we also have I. So you notice that both A and B have the same mood, namely A, I. However, look at A and tell me, is it a valid syllogism? Well, all scientists are college graduates, and some athletes are college graduates. But as you can clearly see, it doesn't follow at all from premise 1 and 2 that some athletes are scientists. So what do we call this type of syllogism? We call it an invalid syllogism. Why? Because the conclusion doesn't follow at all. On the other hand, B is valid. All artists are egoists, some artists are Americans, so it follows that some Americans are egoists. This is a valid inference, so it's a valid syllogism. So if it's not the mood, which is the same, A-I-I, what exactly makes these syllogisms one valid and the other one invalid? Well, as it happens, both syllogisms have the same mood, the same form, A-I-I, but A is invalid and B is valid because they have different figures. Notice that in syllogism A, the middle term occurs as the predicate of the first and the second sentence, the major and the minor. On the other hand, syllogism B is different. The figure is different because the middle term occurs as the subject of the first and the second premise, the major and the minor premise. Okay? So it is very, very important to know the figure. There are 4 possible figures. The way I learned to remember the figures is by tracing, by thinking about a W shape. So you trace it in your mind when you forget. So place the 4 syllogisms side by side, horizontally, and you look at figure 1. Figure 1, you have the middle term in the first premise occurring as the subject, and in the second premise as the predicate. In the second figure, you have the middle term in the first premise occurring as the predicate term, and also for the minor statement, for the minor premise, the second premise, also as the predicate. Then in figure 3, you go back to all the way to the left, and you have the middle term occurring as the subject in both first and second premise, and the fourth one as the middle term is the predicate term of the major premise, and then the subject of the minor premise. And this, if you trace it, it looks like a W. Or let me show you this slide, and you see what I mean. So you trace a W. 1, so diagonally from top left to bottom right. This is figure 1. Then you go all the way up horizontally and you have figure 2. And then you have all the way to the left and you have figure 3. And the last one diagonally, figure 4. This looks like a W. So any standard form categorical syllogism is described completely, precisely when we know the mood and the figure. So if we go back to the example, no bananas are animals, some mammals are animals, therefore some mammals are not bananas. We have the mood is E-I-O and the figure is 2. Why 2? Because remember, figure 2 is the figure that represents the middle term as the predicate term of both major and minor statements. That's where the middle term is. See, animals is the middle term, and it occurs here as the predicate term of the major premise and as the predicate term of the minor premise. Why is animals the middle term? Because it's the term that does not appear in the conclusion. You see? So we call this syllogism an EIO2. When you, by the way, this is just interesting to know, if you were to list all the syllogisms by mood, so you start with A, AAA, AAE, AAI, AAO, and you go on and on and on, all the way to OOO, you have 64 different moods. And when you multiply 64 moods by the different figures, you have 256 different syllogisms. Okay, so that's all. I hope you enjoy this short video. And in the next video, as I said earlier, I'm going to teach you how to use Venn diagrams to test the validity of categorical syllogisms. Thank you.